everyone, be quiet. We've got a loud group in here, a lot of people. So stay calm. I grew up right down the road in Narberth, and it was a really great place to grow up, small little town right outside of Philadelphia. And it actually does have a very strong basketball culture. At the center of it, we have a park, and that's where the Narberth basketball courts are. And really, some of the greatest basketball players all time and out of Philadelphia have played on those courts. Kobe played there. Wilt the Stilt Chamberlain, he played there. I was actually there one night when I was real little shooting with my dad. And Kobe Bryant, he literally just came walking out of the field and was there playing with some of his high school buddies. So that was like one of my favorite experiences, being down at the Narberth courts. But my dad, he was the big basketball guy in our family. He put a ball in my hands when I was about 4 years old, and I just fell in love with the sport. I was like that quintessential tomboy. And I had 2 older brothers, so I just wanted to follow them around and do, every single thing they did. And they were into basketball. Basketball was a family thing for us. And I can remember nights where the 4 of us, my mom would come, she was kind of like our referee. She does not have a competitive bone in her body, could care less, just wants to make sure everyone, doesn't fight. And so we'd go down to the basketball courts. Me and my dad were a team. We'd play against my brother and both my brothers. And I remember I would yell at my dad because he couldn't guard my oldest brother, because my oldest brother was a really good athlete too. And, time would go on, we'd play and play and play. Eventually my brothers would want to go home. I was the one who was the gym rat. I always wanted to just keep shooting. I'd be there all night if I could. So one of my parents would bring my brothers home, and I'd stay there. We'd stay until the lights turned off. And then you would think, all right, this 10-year-old, we should probably bring her home. But my parents, whoever stayed with me, whoever, drew the short straw that night, they'd get in the car, turn the high beams on, and we were back in business, continue shooting. But I was really lucky to grow up in a family who really supported me. Like I said, I was that tomboy. I was ultra competitive, almost to a fault. I hated losing. I was a sore loser. I was probably a sore winner too. I was a huge show off. And but they always supported me. My parents always gave me every opportunity I could have ever asked for. They always put me in a position to be successful. And to this day, I'm where I'm at because of them. And, I also, one of the things people will say about me and, how I've kind of come up the ranks through basketball is my work ethic. And I outworked my opponent. That was what I always did. And that was directly from my parents. And, also growing up with 2 older brothers, that is where I got my competitiveness. Like I said, I wanted to do everything they did. And, a lot of older brothers, they would have a problem with that. But not my brothers. They were perfectly fine with me tagging along. And one story I always like to share is I played on my brother's teams when I was growing up. In boys' leagues, my dad coached us, which, that caused a couple fights here and there when he kept making us do the same drills over and over again. But it was actually my middle brother. We were closest in age. It was his idea to bring me on to the boys' team for the first time, because it was this little local league. It's called Penn Valley Boys Basketball. And to start the season, when they would pick teams, the coaches, they would get their kid plus one other draft pick to start off. And my brother Ben went up to my dad and he was like, what would be a really good idea is if we have Maggie play, because then we can start off our team with me and her plus one extra draft pick. So we'd be stacked as it is. So that's the kind of thing like my brothers would do for me. But at the same time, that is not to say we did not have some huge knockdown, drag-out fights out in the driveway, which usually started with me winning, because they had a problem with that. And they'd kick my ball down the driveway. I'd usually run over, kick them, and then, I'd probably get my butt kicked. But my mom and my dad, I'd go in crying, and they'd always tell me, Mags, if you want to compete with the boys, if you want to go out there and play with them, that's fine. We encourage it, but you can't come in here and tattle on them and expect us to punish them, because then they won't let you play with them, and that'll be a bigger punishment to you overall. But, as I got older, my basketball career, it became more and more important to me. And, I was getting older. I was in middle school, and it was kind of assumed that I would go to Lower Merion, our public school. And they had a great basketball program, especially on the men's side. That's where Kobe went. And, my dad, he made a habit of taking me all around to see all different kinds of girls basketball teams, college level. I came to tons of Nova games. I went to St. Joe's games, Temple games, and he would take me to see high school teams too, and see really good players from around the area. So on this occasion, he took me to see Germantown Academy, and Laura Kurz, who's an alumni of Villanova, was playing, and not only did she drop 30 plus points in that game, but right away, I was just really drawn to this team, the way they played, the style of play. They played with such dominance. And I turned to my dad and I just was like, is there any chance I could have an opportunity to go to this school? And before my parents, like always, they just said, if you want to go here, we'll figure it out. Financially, we'll figure it out. So they sent me to GA girls basketball camp that summer. Let me get an idea if that's what I really wanted to do, where I really wanted to go. And I loved it. I had a relationship with the coach right away, and we were working on my application, So that was a cool moment for me because, my parents, they just always stepped up for me. So when I got to GA, one of the big reasons I wanted to go there is because I wanted to be challenged right away. And they were a powerhouse high school program from Philadelphia, and I got to play with amazing players. One girl by the name of Caroline Doty. She went on to win 4 national championships at UConn. Another one of my teammates, Jessie Carey, she played here at Nova as well. So we were a stacked team. We had a ton of D1 players. So I walked into that first day of practice, and I was not the best on the court right away. I was challenged, and every day we made each other better, which was something I really wanted in school right off the bat. And at the head of it all at that program was my coach, Sherry Retief, who has been one of my biggest mentors through everything when I was deciding where I wanted to go to school, college-wise, when I made the next step onto the professionals, and even now, she invited me back to coach with her at GA while I've been home. And I always say she's one of the best high school coaches in the country, not only just because of her winning record, but when you talk about creating opportunities for female in sport, she lives up to every bit of that. So when my recruiting process started, I was mainly between Penn State and Maryland the entire time, mainly because both schools weren't too far from home. I wanted to go somewhere where my parents could be able to come to every home game. Like I've said, my family is, top priority to me, so I wanted them to be a part, of my college career. So the thing that immediately, stuck with me about Penn State when my first visit there, first off, they were my first offer, so I kind of felt a little bit of loyalty to them. But they had been struggling for a while, and they did have a history of a lot of success. My coach was a first-time head coach. Her name was Coquise Washington. And, I really believed in her vision for the program. And, what drew me to it is I really wanted to go somewhere first where I could make an immediate impact. And second, where I could help take a program to heights it had never been before. That was something that was important to me. I was starting to get looks from some of the bigger programs like UConn and Notre Dame. But I really didn't want to kind of fall into the woodwork of, one of those huge powerhouses. I wanted to go and make a name for myself. On the other hand, I was looking at Maryland, and they had just come off of winning a national championship, and nationally they were, very recognizable at this point. And it was funny because half my family lives in Maryland, the other half lives in Ohio, and Ohio State was starting to kind of get in the running a little bit in the recruiting process. So between those two camps, my family was like, oh my God, this is great. She's either going to be a Terp or we're going to get a Buckeye. It's going to be awesome. And then so when I chose Penn State, I kind of shocked them a little bit, but they had no problem becoming some of the biggest Lady Lion fans out there. So when I made my decision to go to Penn State, I was only in 10th grade. You may hear about some of the recruiting stuff that goes on right now. You'll have players who, they're like, all right, I'm going to release my list of my top 20 colleges. And then they're like, all right, I've gotten it down to my top 15. And for me, I was like, I found 2 schools. It's hard enough for me, making all these relationships. And the thought of having to tell somebody no, that's scary. So I was kind of like, shut it down. I know what I want. I want to focus on my high school career after this and finish strong. So, I was very happy with my decision. So my senior year of high school, it came about, and I was elected to the McDonald's All-American high school team, which is a big event every year. They have a girls team and a boys team, and it's the best high school players in the country, boys and girls. And they bring us to a city of the committee's choosing. And for a week, we have events. We do, we have a slam dunk competition. We have a 3-point competition, skills competition. I won the 3-point competition my year because that's my thing. But we also do a ton of community outreach through the Ronald McDonald Foundation. And, it was a really cool way to wrap up my high school career and get to know some players who, as my career is going on, they continue to pop up. They're people I've played with now, people I play against. And it's cool to see that here we were, at the top of our level in high school, and a lot of us have sustained that and are now playing at the highest level professionally. That kind of capped off my high school career. When I first got to Penn State, there were most certainly some growing pains. I always say when you move on from one level to the next, especially in athletics, so high school to college, college to the pros, it's usually the best high school players are now on a team in college. When you get to in college to the pros, everybody on your pro team, they were the best on their college team. So it can be really hard with all those personalities. You have a lot of alpha dogs out there, trying to take the lead. And when I got to Penn State, I could tell my competitiveness, my intensity, that kind of threw off some of my teammates. And like I said, they had been coming off of a couple losing seasons, and I had never been a part of really a program that lost. So I was not going into there thinking I was losing any games. And so I can remember we had a conversation with our head coach, me and the 2 other freshmen I came in with, and it was all about balance. This is something I really wish there were some student athletes here tonight so I'd share with them. But for the first time when you are a college, especially student athlete, you have so many things you got to balance, and your social life, your family life, practice, games, everything. You have so many things that are taking little bits of your energy, and you really got to figure out how to balance that. And balance has always been a thing for me that's been hard. And I remember she looked at one of my teammates, and she goes, I can tell you right now your social life is going to be a hard thing for you to balance. And we had been there for one summer, and this girl already had the nickname the mayor of Penn State. We would be taking people around on the golf carts, and we had recruits up, and everyone would be waving to her Talia, you coming to the party tonight? And she would just be with my coach, we're trying to recruit right now. And my coach looked at me, and she knew right away, I would really have a hard time balancing just my basketball and keeping that in perspective. I lived and died by every loss, every bad game. I wouldn't want to leave my dorm if I had a bad game. And I've always struggled with that. That's something that to this day, it's still a process for me, is just balancing everything and making sure I keep things in perspective. So while I was there, we really had a great run. We won 3 Big Ten regular season championships. We were in the NCAA tournament every year. We made it to the Sweet 16 twice. I was 2-time Big Ten Player of the Year. And again, I got to play with some really amazing players, some people who really brought the best out in me and challenged me every day, one of which was a girl named Alex Bentley. Now, she plays in the WNBA as well. She's had all-star seasons. She's really, really thrived at the professional level. And I say she's not only one of the most competitive players I've played with, but one of the best. She's the kind of player she kind of puts a little fear in you when you step on the court. And right away, because we were cut from the same mold, ultra competitive, intense, we both wanted to be the go-to player. We definitely butted heads at first. And I can remember a practice, we had just played at Dayton. We had a triple overtime game. We actually won the game, but we had given up I seriously think we gave up 130 points. And that's too much, apparently. So our coaches called an all-guards practice at 6 a.m. the next day. And so everyone's pretty, pissed off. No one's happy that we're there at 6 a.m. after a triple overtime game. And so me and my teammate Alex, we kind of start going at each other. We were chirping back and forth. So our coach is all right, everybody out. Sends the practice players home, sends the rest of the team home. And she just ran us sidelines until I think I was crawling. I couldn't even run anymore. And there's nothing like, a couple sprints to, force you to start getting along. And, but we started to work better together, and we made it work as that first year went around. But it wasn't until the end of that first year, after our season had ended, we had both been invited out to the World University Game Trials which is like an Olympics for college kids. So we were both trying to make the team. And so we were sent out to the OTC, the Olympic Training Center, and it was all the best players from around the country, from all the powerhouse schools, Connecticut, Tennessee, Notre Dame. And we're out there competing, and we're like, both of us are just as good as any of these players out here, and we play together. So we neither of us ended up making the team, so that lit a little fire under us as well. But we also were out there on our own, and all we had was really each other. So that was a really big turning point in our relationship. And, you know, once we were able to come together, you know, that's when our team started to have a whole lot of success. So yeah, that was about that. And then my senior year of college came around. You know, it comes so quickly. Those 4 years, they go by like that. Everyone tells you over and over again, but it's like, Jesus, like what happened? Like, I got to start preparing now. But my senior year, it ended at Stanford in the Sweet 16. We had to play them on their home court. But, you know, it was an awesome career at Penn State, and I wouldn't have changed a thing about it. But what a lot of people don't realize about from the time for the NCAA season ends to when you start preparing for the WNBA, it happens like that. Your season ends and the draft, if you go late into March Madness, the draft happens about 2 or 3 weeks later. So you're finding out which city you're going to be moving across country to. You're still a kid practically. And, you know, it's pretty shocking how quick it happens. The NBA, they have a summer league, so they get drafted. They have a whole summer to spend with their teams, play games, kind of get acquainted with the new style of play, the physicality. It happens so fast for us. So the night of the draft, I had a big group of my family and friends. We were down in, I don't know if you guys have ever been to Frankfurt Hall, down in Fishtown. Anybody? Yeah? We had a big projection screen set up. I wasn't invited to the draft, which was disappointing because I was projected at the beginning of my senior year to be a first-round pick, and I ended up not being a first-round pick. But anyway, so we all hung out. And you don't want to go to the draft if you're not sure you're going to be a first-round pick, because there's nothing worse than being that person who's just kind of like sitting. Everyone else has been picked. You're sitting with your family, like the camera's right on you, like, all right, third round, last pick, like, please, God, like, let me get picked. But so we were down there watching it, and the first round goes by, second round gets going, and the pick for the New York Liberty comes up, and I'm kind of like, oh, we're all like excited, and even the commentator of the draft says, you know, this would be a good pick for them to get Maggie Lucas. They need a shooter, and so we're all like on the edge of our seats thinking I could end up really close to home again. Pick goes by, I don't get picked. The round keeps going on, and I end up going 21st overall to the Phoenix Mercury. And, you know, in that moment, that was, you know, regardless of where I went, where I thought I was going to go, it was a dream come true, you know. That was what I was been working for my whole life. You know, I wanted to go to the WNBA, so seeing my name come up and, you know, find out where I was headed, it was super exciting. So that first year, so a week later, I'm in Phoenix. You know, I'm in a hotel for the first 2 weeks. I wasn't moved into an apartment or anything. I had to go earn a spot. And let me tell you, that first practice where you're competing for a paycheck, it was an intensity that I had never experienced before. And there's really no other way to experience it than just being there. It was crazy. And you can't help but think, all right, like, how many shooting guards are here? How many point guards are here? Like, you know, is there a spot here? Because in the WNBA, there's only 12 teams, 12 spots at most on a team, and so 144 spots in the whole league. And the whole world is gunning for those spots. The percentage of women's basketball players that go on to make it to the WNBA is 0.03. It's so hard to get on a team. And once you make a team, you try and hold on to that spot for dear life. And so I found out very quickly that one of the star players of the Phoenix Mercury, one of her teammates from her Russian overseas team, was coming in the last day of training camp, and she played the same position as me. So I was like, there really is not a spot here. They drafted me as an asset, and they don't really have any plans for me here. So I was kind of like, all right, I got to like refocus mentally, because I had been having a really good camp, and I felt like I kind of had two choices in that moment. I could either kind of just lose it mentally, check out, and plan on just going overseas. But there was a preseason tournament, so I was like, all right, all I got to do is get myself to that preseason tournament, and play well and hopefully get picked up by another team. So that's exactly what I did. I got myself to the preseason tournament. When I had my chance, I finally got a couple of minutes. I got in there and I played great. And so it was the last day of training camp. I was still in Phoenix. I wasn't really sure, of what my future was going to be, but, I was proud, that I was able to go out there and prove that I did belong in this league. And so I get a call from the coach of the Phoenix Mercury, the head coach, and she says, "You've been traded to Indiana. You're on a red eye out of here. You're going to be in Indiana the next morning." So I'm in between what? And this is awesome. I made a team. My dream has come true. I'm on a roster. So that night, I'm on a red eye. I'm in Indiana at about 3 in the morning, and I got to be at practice by 9 a.m. And I'm just it was a whirlwind, but I was excited. I was excited. I think my adrenaline got me through that first day. But it was hard because, those first 2 weeks of training camp, you learn a whole system of what the team's going to run. And, it's like I said, it's short. It's very condensed. You don't have a whole summer like the NBA players do. And so I had just learned a whole system in Phoenix, and then I had to go over and learn a whole new system in Indiana. And I'm the kind of player learns by doing. So they were just drawing up plays and being like, "All right, you got it?" And I'm like, yeah, let's go. It was crazy. But it was a hard way. It was a hard way to start off that rookie season, especially there being so much change as it is, learning a new pace of play, a new physicality. And I struggled for the first time in my basketball career that rookie season. It was, I didn't get into some games, DNP, did not play. My contributions to the team felt sparse. I just couldn't feel like I could get any rhythm. And like I said, it was the first time in my basketball career I really felt like I was struggling. When I got to high school, it clicked right away. I was rolling. When I got to Penn State, everything clicked. I was rolling. I was freshman of the year, sixth man of the year. So, this was a pretty foreign feeling to me. And, one thing I always like to share with athletes especially, but it applies to any area of life. And, that is, I've been last person off the bench. I've been a role player. I've been a sixth man. I've been the star, the go-to player. And, no matter what your role is on a team, it's important. And sometimes you lose track of, what another person is going through because you're so caught up in your own role and what that is. And, when I was the go-to player at Penn State, I was guilty of not understanding my teammates, not understanding the last player off the bench and how difficult that job was. You do all the practice, you work hard, and, come game day, you don't get to go out there and show what you're made of. So, that was a hard adjustment for me. And then also, I look back on that first season and, going through what I'm going through now, being out due to injury for almost 2 years. I look at that and I'm like, I was so hard on myself and overanalyzed every little situation. You know what I mean? Why is that girl going in before me? She had a horrible week of practice. I worked my butt off. I should be in there. And, instead of just, letting it happen and giving myself time to adjust, I pushed so hard against that struggle that, it was not an enjoyable year of basketball for me. And I always, I love playing basketball, so it's not something that should, cause that kind of frustration. But again, those are the kind of seasons you learn the most from, and I totally did. As I went into my second season, my role did start to grow. We ended up making it to the finals, which was an unbelievable experience, sold out arenas. It was unbelievable. We played against the Minnesota Lynx, who has 4 Olympians on their team. We took them to Game 5 and ended up losing, but we won the Eastern Conference that year, and it was a special year. What a lot of people do not realize about women's basketball, though, is just how much of a grind it is, especially if you play in the WNBA. So after my rookie season in the WNBA, I signed a contract to play in France. It was a small city called Taurasi in northern France, right near the border of Belgium. And so the grind of the seasons. So the WNBA season lasts about 4 months. You go through the summer months. And after that, midway through that season, you usually sign with your overseas team, sign a contract. And it usually stipulates 7 days after your last game in the WNBA, you're to report to wherever you signed overseas. Yeah. So then your overseas season, it'll last about 8 months. It can go all the way to mid-April, late April. So you can be going right from that season into your training camp back in the WNBA. So my first season, like I said, I was in France, and it was one of my favorite basketball experiences. It was very different. The style of play fit my game really well. It was really finesse, not as much physicality. But my city was awesome. We played in a really cool arena, like this really cool Euro-style arena. It held about 3,500 people, and standing room on the baselines. And they were just very passionate fans. And the difference between I saw the fans over there and here is they were not so like fair weather, like especially living in Philadelphia, how our fans get. Like they don't put up with much. If you show a little bit of sign of weakness, they're coming for your throat. But over there, it was like a really big social event for them. They just had fun at the games. They just wanted to see good competition. So it was a really fun environment to play in. And the other interesting thing was, sharing a court with, our team was a melting pot of all different cultures, I was the only American. Other English speakers were Canadian. One girl was from New Zealand, a couple girls from Africa, a couple French girls, 2 girls from Croatia. And communicating on the court, it was interesting. One of my teammates, who was one of the other best players on the team, she didn't speak a word of English. I didn't speak a word of French. And so when we were on the court together, we would pull everything out of the book. We would be on our hands trying to diagram plays to each other without talking. We'd have all kinds of hand motions. So it was a huge lesson in communication. But it was a lot of fun, and we ended up having a really great year. We took a team that the year before had only won 2 or 3 games in the French league to finishing top 5. So the city really got behind us, and it was a really positive experience. And also, coming off that first rookie season, I had a coach in France who really put a lot of trust in me, gave me a ton of freedom. So I was kind of able to get my swagger back, get my confidence back, and really start playing free again and not worrying about every little thing. So like I said, I came back from that first year. Excuse me, I'm gonna take a little sip. So after that first year overseas, I went back into the WNBA for my second year. And like I said, we went to the finals. We had a great run. And but after that, so I had played a college season, went straight to Phoenix, straight to Indiana for my first WNBA season, then straight to Taurasi for my first overseas season, straight back to Indiana for my second WNBA season. So I had played 4 seasons in a row, and I felt worn down. And when I was in college, I felt like I made some of my biggest strides in my game, biggest improvements were in the summertime. When I had time to get in the weight room, get quicker and stronger, work on different aspects of my game. So I decided I was going to take my third year, it would have been my second year overseas. I was going to take that season off and get home. I hired a strength coach, and we really just got to work. I wanted to go into that third season in the WNBA and really have a breakout year. So, that's exactly what happened. I went home, I got a lot better, a lot stronger. I came back into Indiana for my third season feeling better than I ever had. I was scoring at a really high clip. I was contributing every time I stepped on the floor. I wasn't even really concerned with playing time. I was like, because when I get out there, I'm going to make an impact. I'm ready to go. And I was confident that my role would continue to grow, as the season went on. But it was our first away game. I was coming down the court. We were playing Minnesota. It feels like we play Minnesota every game. But we were playing Minnesota, first road game. I'm coming down into the third quarter, just trying to get a shot up. A defender runs up at me. I go to plant to cross over and just throw a shot up. And my leg, it was just like a noodle. And it was, I had never been injured before. I never injured my knee or anything. And in that moment, it was like, I've never felt what this pain feels like, but I know exactly what just happened. And so I tore my ACL, I shredded up my meniscus in a bunch of places, and just like that, things changed on a dime. The night before, I had just verbally accepted a new contract overseas, playing in the Euro League, which is the most prestigious league over there, highest paying, back in France in a really cool city. So everything was really clicking for me. But in that moment, I was thrown something that I was not expecting at all. But I was lucky enough because the Indiana Fever stood by me through that first injury. They could have cut me literally the next day. There was nothing bonding in that contract WNBA rookie contract lasts 4 years, and you can get cut at any point in time, even if it's injury. So there's not a whole lot of stability in it at all. So I was lucky enough. They stood by me, paid me through that season. I stayed in Indiana for the rest of the summer, rehabbing. I had surgery there. When the season ended, I went back to Philadelphia, continued my rehab, continued training, and before I knew it, it was time, to get back going again, and season 4 was rolling up. So Indiana brought me back early, had my apartment ready for me and everything. I was doing morning workouts every morning with the new head coach, and it was really a blessing to have these, have this time and really get back in the gym and do my return to play protocol. At that point, I thought I had seen just about as much adversity as I could handle. And, that rookie season just being really challenged mentally and then going through this injury. And so, I wasn't prepared for what was about to happen, but I was in a morning workout with the new head coach. They had brought in a practice player to play one-on-one with me. And I went up for a layup, and I just kind of got knocked off balance. I put my right leg back again, and I just felt like that dreaded feeling again. And it hyperextended. I was wearing my brace, and just like that, I tore my ACL again. Second time in less than a year. I've had 3 surgeries in like a 1.5 year span. And, that moment when I tore it the second time, that was by far like the darkest moment of my career. I couldn't understand. I was questioning everything. I couldn't understand how something like that could have happened to me. I worked so hard. I wasn't doing anything I wasn't supposed to be doing. Everybody up to that point had told me I looked like the best they had seen someone come back from an ACL. So it was shocking. And, I always say, about, how I felt during that time is, when you're going through something that's pretty shitty, you got to let yourself feel it. And, I let myself mourn that season because that's what I had to do. I had to mourn the loss of another season. And, so I let myself feel those feels, but I decided I was going to put a limit on it. I literally set an alarm in my phone, like stop crying. And so when that buzzer went off, that's when I decided it was time to move forward. I had to start preparing for, what was next. And I can remember before I left Indy, after the second injury, I talked to my trainer out there who was with me through the whole first knee injury, and he was just as devastated as I was when I heard it the second time. And he shared with me something personal, something he had been through. And the moral of his story was, what's it worth to you? And, so when I asked myself, what is this worth to me, going through this all over again, surgeries, rehab, not getting to play, not getting paid, to me, it's worth everything. I grew up playing basketball for way more than money. I do it because I love it. It's my passion. I've been lucky enough that I've gotten to play and get paid for it. But at the end of the day, I'd be doing it regardless. You know what I mean? I'd still be playing even if I wasn't getting paid to do it. So I was willing to go through and risk. It could happen again. That's one thing I've learned. You never know when this kind of thing can happen. But to me, it's worth it because playing is what I ultimately love to do. So again, when that alarm went off, I woke up that morning. I told my mom, buy me a bottle of spray paint. She's like, oh God, what are you gonna do? And so I woke up and I spray painted my bedroom wall, and it sounds corny, but I just spray painted the words, "No quitting me," on my wall. And every morning when I wake up, that's the first thing I see. And it's been a very boring journey. I wake up and I don't get to play in front of crowds. I don't get to be a part of a team for these last 2 years, and that kills me. But when I look at that wall, every morning that wakes me up and gets me ready to attack the day and put all that behind me. I'm working for something in the future. I always like to talk about, there's the iceberg example, and it's success is the tip of the iceberg. Everything below the iceberg is, what people don't see, the struggle, the setbacks, the doubt, all those things. But those are the things that really prepare you for that success first off. And when you reach that, tip of the iceberg, that success, those are the things that make it all worth it and make it feel so good. So, I'm looking forward to the future. I just signed not too long ago with the Atlanta Dream. So, not only did I get I got my first chance in WNBA, not only did I get a second chance after my first injury, but I'm getting a third chance. And, not a lot of people get that, and I don't take, a second of it for granted. And I'm just continuing now to work and prepare myself for training camp and, getting ready for that next step. So I'm very excited about that. So yeah, any questions up till now? Because I got like a part 2. Anybody, questions, anybody? It's cool if you don't, we can keep going.
I want to know what happens in part 2.
All right, so yeah, that's my story up until now. But what I also like to talk about is, there is, an inherent sexism that comes with being, a female athlete. And, it starts from when you're very, little all the way, to the top. And there's so many moments where you look at a situation and you can't help but question, not only question, but you just say, this would never happen to a men's player. You wouldn't be having this conversation on the men's side. So I like to get, a perspective. I do like to go a little back in history of the women's game and women's sports. So in the early 1900s, late 1800s, physical education for women was becoming more and more advanced, which was totally not accepted social norms of the time. It was like, just stay in the kitchen, cook, have children. And male medical professionals, they went as far as to say that, too much physical activity would hurt women's reproductive systems and stifle their mental capacities. And, at the time, people believed that. When it comes specifically to basketball, at first the sport was embraced. It was spreading all over the country. James Naismith was the creator, and it was embraced. People were loving playing it, and especially in rural areas, farm towns where there wasn't a lot to do. All they needed was a ball and a basket. They played on grassy courts, and a lot of the girls actually learned the game from playing with boys. And there was really no concern about it being too much for women to handle, injury, anything like that. And James Naismith, who, like I said, he was the creator of basketball, he had this to say after witnessing his first girls' basketball tournament. He said, "I was forced to admit that I had not seen a boys' game during the entire season that would compare with the speed, accuracy of passing, and teamwork of that of the girls." So you would think, they have, basically the endorsement of the creator of basketball. But that initial success came to a screeching halt, and mainly because, it was challenging the norms of the time. And so it started to be banned, mainly through universities and colleges. And this was some of their reasoning. Participation could do permanent injury to the beauty and health, stating that the emotional excitement was an evil influence upon the emotional and nervous development of the feminine nature with a tendency to unsex the player. Aggressive court play clashed with the ladylike behavior and could possibly cause damage to the reproductive system. So obviously these claims are ridiculous. There's no proof, so they didn't really stand the test of time. But, when you're trying to get, change and trying to, change the way women are seen, that slowed down the development, of athletics for women and specifically the female athlete. So, after hearing, a little of the history, I learned that history when I was really young. I was always told, my grandma played basketball back when they played with 6 players. 3 were on offense and 3 were on defense. So 3 players were only allowed to shoot the ball, 3 were just to play defense. And they made the rules that way because they were trying, first off, it was people trying to save the game from it being taken away from the girls. So they tried to make the rules seem less, not as active as the men's game. So it'd be all right, look, they're not playing as crazy a game as the men, so it's okay. So, when that's your history and, things happen along the way, you can't help but think, there's still shades of a lot of that sexism, in our world today. And there's 2 experiences I had that stood out to me that I wanted to share. One was when I was in high school. We were playing against a team not too far from here. They were in our league. And we played against, like I said, we had a lot of Division I players. That wasn't, the norm in every high school. We were pretty much a powerhouse. So we came against some games where our coach would take the starters out halfway through the third quarter. We'd stop pressing after the first quarter, stop fast breaks after the first quarter, stuff like that. She didn't want to run the score up and, cause any problems. But in this game, we were 3 minutes into the first quarter. I stole the ball around half court. There was a player guarding me or something. I did an around the back reverse layup. we were all pumped up. Like I've always been kind of cocky, and I wear my emotions on my sleeve. But we were pumped up, my team was pumped up, and I look over at the bench and I see my coaches having like a confrontation in the middle of the game. Turns out their athletic director, when that play happened, came charging over to our coach in the middle of the game, demanded that I be taken out, the whole team be taken out, and that we were showing poor sportsmanship. It wasn't a way to represent the women's game. This is in the middle of a game. Another athletic director in a high school level game. This isn't rec league or anything. This is high school level, demanding all these things, thinking it's appropriate to come up to an opposing coach and, basically attack her in the middle of a game. And, again, that's a situation where you think to yourself, this just would never, ever happen on the men's side. So, those experiences in high school, they're few and far between. Nothing like that really happened, other than that one experience. But, when it was time to move on from high school to college, I was kind of excited, all right, there won't be as many games where we have to, I can play a lot more because I won't have to come out at halftime. But another thing that happened, so it was my junior year at Penn State. I was playing with my teammate Alex Bentley, and like I said, we were cut from the same mold. We were passionate players. We had a lot of fun playing together. We celebrated, when stuff happened on the court. So we were playing against Wisconsin. She came down the court. She always would throw this around the back pass to me, and I'd knock down the three. So that's what happened. The other team called a timeout. They wanted to regroup. We met at half court. We chest bumped or something. And, we thought really nothing of it. It was just, business as usual. So the game ended. We ended up winning. The next day we come into practice, and we're called into our coach's office. We can tell we're in some sort of trouble. So we go in there, and she's like, yeah, we just got a call from, the athletic director of Penn State called her into his office because the coach of Wisconsin had gone back to Wisconsin, complained to their athletic director that we were not representing women's basketball in the Big Ten in the way that it should be. And, we were emotional, fun players, but it was always just, we weren't getting in other people's faces, trash talk and anything like that. And again, it's like you think about a Michigan State game. I don't know if you guys watch much of the Big Ten basketball, but player dunks, I was watching just this weekend, he gets up in the crowd and screams into the crowd. And, it's pretty similar of a play, And one thing with women's sports especially is we're constantly told that we don't get the same viewership and support because our games aren't as exciting as the men's side. So here we are trying to add emotion, exciting plays to our game, and it's getting shut down. And, the Big Ten, it's one of the big conferences in the country. So for them to think, an athletic director to think, that's a big enough deal to bring to our athletic director, it's pretty interesting. And, you just would never see that on the men's side. So I kind of want to go into the pay a little bit of it. So one question I get more than anything, which is odd because I've always been told it's rude to ask people how much money they make. But when people ask me what I do and I tell them I play professional basketball, they immediately feel like they can ask me how much money I make. And I've even been asked, do you have another job too? I'm like, no, pretty much takes up a good amount of my time. I don't have another job. No. And but I kind of want to educate them a little bit. So I tell them, it's a comfortable living. In WNBA and overseas, they pay for all of our expenses, our apartment, our cars, living expenses. They take care of all that. So what you make, you bank, and you can be smart about it. You can set yourself up pretty good. But when you do get down to the numbers of it, it can be pretty shocking. So the league minimum in the WNBA is about $38,000. That's with no years of prior experience. And the league max is about $110,000. And that's not bad. It's a 4-month season. Definitely not something, you come out of college, that's pretty good for a 4-month job. And then overseas, we actually get paid more overseas, but it is a longer season. Carrying the WNBA tag with you when you go overseas is a good thing because they like to be able to say that, oh, we brought in a WNBA player. She plays professionally in America. So overseas, WNBA players on the low end will make anywhere from $40,000 up to high six figures, and you have players making in the millions now. But when you compare it to the NBA, it's pretty shocking. The NBA league minimum is way over $500,000. The maxes, I mean, I'm sure you guys have heard how just astronomical some of these numbers are. Steph Curry makes $34 million a year. LeBron makes $33 million a year. And to put that into perspective, one of our best players in the WNBA, Diana Taurasi, she makes max, obviously, about $110,000 a year playing in the WNBA. But overseas, she plays in Russia, and they pay her really well. She makes about $1.5 million a year. So I think it was in 2016, she was actually paid by her overseas team in Russia more money than her max contract in the WNBA to sit out the year and rest up for the overseas season. Yeah. So, I mean, I always think that's pretty interesting to share, just because they're willing to pay her more just to sit out and rest for the season. Going beyond sports, women make, I mean, it's known fact, women make about 80% of what men do. And, I think it is an exciting time to be, a female or woman, because there's so many movements for equal pay in all, different walks of life. But, it's always important to know where you stand and, how much further we still have to go. One thing I wanted to touch on, too, was this year, it was a great year to be a Philadelphia sports fan, obviously. Our first Super Bowl, the city was just, it was unbelievable. It was an unbelievable time to be in Philadelphia. The unity it created, it was unbelievable. It gave you chills. And a lot of people ask me, though, they want to know, does the WNBA have a team in Philadelphia? And my answer is usually, no, it probably wouldn't work here. And that answer in itself is kind of sad. Why wouldn't it work? And it's usually because in a city like this, the market's too big. But, in such a passionate sports town, it's sad to think that we couldn't get behind, a professional women's team of any kind, soccer, basketball, whatever it might be. So that's something in the future I would love to see change. But to this point, I feel like I've been very fortunate for the opportunities that I've had. Like I said, my parents made everything available to me from the second I, told them I wanted to play basketball. I was saying I wanted to play professional basketball when I was 4 years old. And, they made everything available to me. I'm lucky to have had trailblazers like Pat Summitt. I always like to talk about Pat Summitt because she really pushed for Title IX. She made women's basketball relevant in the U.S. and, just provided so many opportunities for young girls coming up. I've gotten to play with amazing players. In Indiana, I played with a girl named Tamika Catchings, who's a 4-time Olympian. She's done just about everything you can possibly do. And she's been an unbelievable leader, someone I looked up to. And I told her when I first got to Indiana, but she didn't like to hear this because it made her feel old, but I saw her play for the first time when she played at Tennessee for Pat Summitt against St. Joe's when I was in 2nd grade. And I ended up being her teammate in the WNBA for 3 years. So she didn't like that story, but I always like to share it because I think that's pretty funny, and it just shows, how full circle things come. And, lastly, this was another thing I wanted to share with students, student athletes especially, but I'll share it anyways. I like to kind of leave with just a little word of advice, something that I've learned along the way. And, in college, going to such an amazing university, being surrounded by people who, bring you so many opportunities, I think that's a time when you really need to reach out to other people and share that experience, especially with your community and, people in your community. And I always like to share this one story. When I was up at Penn State, it was my freshman year. We had just lost at Ohio State. We were on the bus waiting for our plane to be de-iced, and everyone was moping. Everyone was in a horrible mood. And my one teammate, she was my roommate, she gets a call from her mom, who is a nurse at Children's Hospital. And she was finishing up her rounds that night, and she goes into her one patient's room. She notices over the back of the girl's wheelchair, she has a basketball blanket. She goes in, she says hi, and starts kind of talking hoops with her. And the girl says, I'm feeling good tonight, but I am kind of disappointed because my favorite team lost. And my favorite player, Maggie Lucas, didn't play well. And she goes, that's interesting because, my daughter plays for the Lady Lions, and she rooms with Maggie Lucas. I bet you I could put you on the phone with Maggie Lucas in about 2 minutes. So that night, I met my friend Taylor Dippery, and she was born with spina bifida. She has surgeries. She's had surgeries pretty much, every year of her life. that weekend we had a bye weekend, so I was going to be back in Philadelphia. So me and my teammate, we went and visited her at the hospital. And right away, I just connected with her. She, someone who was, again, cut from the same mold. She was a competitor. She competed every day. She was one of the strongest people I've ever come across. So we started a really close friendship. And she was from Harrisburg, so my parents would actually pick her up on the way to every home game. And when I moved on to the WNBA, whenever I played close, New York, DC, any of those places that were closer, she would come, stay with me when I was on the road. And it was one of those things, in that moment, I was reaching out to her. I wanted to kind of bring her along with me at Penn State because, I could just tell right away, she was someone I wanted to be around. And, especially in these last, 2 years, what I've gone through, she constantly gives me perspective. She calls me every week to check in. And, here's a girl who her family was told she wouldn't live past day one. She wouldn't live past week one. She wouldn't live past month one. Now she's 25 years old, completely independent. She's a basketball coach herself. And, she continually provides me with perspective. And, when you reach out to somebody, I guarantee it'll come back to you 10 times over. And that's how it's been with me and her. And especially in this last year and a half, she tells me every day, she says, 1 million people would kill to have the opportunities you've had up to this point. So keep fighting and, you'll get through this. And, that's where I'm at right now. I'm still fighting and, looking forward to what the future holds. Yeah. So that's all, guys.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for listening, guys. Not all at once now.
Yeah, I know you guys have questions. There's all kinds of stuff that you ask me. Do you want to hang out here or do you want to go get a cup of coffee?
Whatever you guys want to do, I'm cool with. You can hang out of here. Yeah.
Oh, do you want to do Q&A for the camera or do you want to?
Oh, whatever works for you, whatever you guys want me to do.
One, to clarify the relationship between the NBA and the WNBA, and assuming that there is one, what do you think the NBA should be doing that it's not currently doing to promote the WNBA?
Well, it's interesting because, honestly, the WNBA is just starting to run and create profit. There are still teams that do not create a profit. And some teams are affiliated with NBA teams. When I was in Indiana, we were affiliated under Pacers Sports Entertainment. When I go to Atlanta, they're actually not. We play in the same arena, but we don't have the same ownership. And there's a lot of teams that there's, I'd say, maybe half the league, maybe less than half the league now, is actually affiliated with NBA teams. The other ones are not. So you have Connecticut Sun, they're not affiliated with an NBA team. Seattle, they're not. There's a Vegas team now. MGM bought them. New York was affiliated with the Knicks, but they're looking to sell them, actually. There's been, what I think, the NBA, honestly, has done a lot by us. They've done right by us. Because if they hadn't, they kind of stuck their necks out for us, the league wouldn't exist, honestly. One thing I always say that I think would help, when I go to an NBA game, first off, and I think it's kind of culturally, something that needs to kind of shift a little bit. When I go to NBA games, a lot of the fans there, I see like guys who just came from the office, they're all coming there afterwards. I see dads with their little boys, with their kids, and I think that is, kind of a marketing thing we're missing out somehow in the WNBA is, we really need to get people bringing their daughters to games. And, with my upbringing, my parents took me to lots of women's events. And I just feel like we don't get that as much in the WNBA. And, everyone's thing is we're not marketable. And, there's a lot of, not so nice things that are said about the WNBA. And, I've seen it in I think it was South Park. They did a whole skit making fun of the WNBA. And, there's lots of stuff out there and they say that's why we're not marketable. Which is pretty offensive in a lot of ways. But I don't know, it's hard to market women's sports. And, I don't understand it because I'm passionate about it. But it's gotten a lot better. It's continuing to improve. there are more teams than ever that are profitable now. So yeah.
Maybe the other end of that, you know, you mentioned Title IX when you were talking, and it's been in place long enough that there ought to be, a generational shift as well.
Yeah.
So you grew up playing sports in a different way than I played sports.
Yeah.
How much effect do you think that it has, and is there something else that would help it all work better? Is Title IX enough? Does it go far enough?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it does, but I think so many of the issues with women's sports, it's just like, it's the way we're brought up. But I do think, like, when you say, like, my generation, like, my age group, like, I think our kids will be way more interested in sports, and I think that, like, kind of wave will bring a lot more attention to women's sports. One thing I forgot to talk about was the U.S. women's national soccer team, and they have actually surpassed popularity of the men's side. And so in the last Women's World Cup, that year they brought in $16 million more in revenue than the men's side. And
yeah, but they're paid a fraction.
But they're paid a fraction of what the men make. The women make about $100,000 a year, provided that they win 20 exhibition games. And the men's side, they get paid about $260,000 a year, and they could lose every one of their exhibition games. The men get a bonus between $5,000 and $17,000 a year for every extra exhibition game they play. The women don't get any kind of bonus money. And there is an example where it's like, okay, like the NBA, we can understand, they bring in more money. But here is a situation where they're being run by the same organization, the U.S. Soccer Federation, which is a nonprofit. So why are they basing their payroll decisions on basically estimated revenue, but also on, men's and women's? Like, it makes no sense. And so that's an example where it's like, okay, they brought in more money and they're still getting paid way less than the men. So how can you, rationalize that?
Are you familiar with women's hockey? What happened, I think, like a year and a half ago or so?
No.
It's actually fascinating. It's the same exact thing. The U.S. women's hockey team was like really strong. They just won Olympic gold. The excellent team, they won a bunch of world championships in a row. I mean, it's basically Canada.
Yeah.
But it came out that these women were like buying their own equipment, and they all had. I mean, you said you don't have to take a second job. They were like on the weekends training, paying to train. USA Hockey wasn't even giving them ice time. Like, they were losing money being on the team.
Jeez.
And so what's interesting is they said, to hell with you, we're not going to the Olympics. And it wasn't, unfortunately, until the men's side, which, it's weird because of the way they incorporate professionals, sometimes not, where they said, if they strike, we strike.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, but then they just totally, so it's exactly
Yeah.
what you're talking about. I mean, these are like, the number 2 ranked, number 1 ranked team in the world. They fill stadiums.
Yeah.
They do all this stuff.
Especially now after the Olympics. I mean, they're going to...
Yeah, I mean, the men's team was garbage.
Yeah.
And the women's team was...
Yeah, the men's soccer team didn't even make the World Cup. Didn't even qualify.
It's exactly the situation in hockey.
Yeah.
I don't get that. So if it's not that the play is less exciting,
Yeah.
there are more skilled teams, they have more viewers, they bring in more money, there are children in the
Yeah.
the field.
They're selling more merchandise. That women's soccer team sold unbelievable numbers of merchandise. And it's interesting, going back to the history of it, and you kind of in the NBA standing by the WNBA, men's hockey standing by women's hockey. When basketball first started to be banned, there were groups of men. There was this one group in Iowa who basically stood up saying, our daughters, they work on the farm all day. We know what they can do physically. They can play basketball. And a lot of times it does take, a group, and it's kind of sad to say, but it will take a group of men to stand up and be like, listen, we're standing behind this. And it goes all the way back to then when basketball was being banned. And these guys stood up and they're like, our daughters, we'll coach them. If you guys won't, we'll coach our daughters because we know what they can handle. You know what I mean? So it's interesting. Yeah. It is.
And it's not rational. It's not economically rational. It's not based on viewership.
Yeah.
So you're right. It's a cultural.
Yeah, and it was interesting when the WNBA first started, there was no collective bargaining agreement, and it was just completely unorganized and out of control. And you had star players like Lisa Leslie and Cynthia Cooper, Cheryl Swoops. They were making millions of dollars, but every other person down the lineup were making like $4,000, $5,000, no health care. They were working other jobs. And, again, those are people who basically, carved out a way for the rest. And my coach at Penn State, she has a law degree too, and she actually negotiated the collective bargaining agreement for the WNBA and set it up. So first off, we have health care, dental, and so some people are not getting like millions and millions of dollars, and the rest of us are just getting scraps. You know what I mean? So.
Do you have, this is the second part of my question. Are there NBA players who are vocal advocates for the WNBA? Is this sorts of people who might be in a position of
Yeah. And the NBA actually started a campaign. Like, you'll see commercials around the time the WNBA season's getting started where they have NBA players saying, like, I watched the WNBA, they're great players. Like, they were playing him over the All-Star break.
They have like a customs competition.
Yeah. They bring in WNBA, they try and the NBA will bring in WNBA players for different skills stuff over All-Star weekend. And so I do think the NBA like stands by us. It's just like, as a culture, like, we gotta support it more because it's good. I think about the way I grew up and how great of an outlet it was for me to, have basketball. And my dad took me to see players so I could say, hey, like, look, these are competitive girls. Like, it's okay. Like, there's an outlet for you. So I just feel like we need more of that. I think it needs to be, more, every little boy, like every boy grows up playing some sort of sport, going to games. And, with girls, it's kind of like, if they're into it, whatever. And, I'm not saying you have to play sports, but, I just feel like it's more ingrained for, boys to play sports. And, that's what's expected out of them, which is kind of unfair at the same time, too. But we'll see.
It's interesting that you mentioned that you ended up playing with someone you had seen when you were a second grader.
Yeah.
Because that visibility, and you hear women in the military say that, you hear women in STEM careers say that, that I had someone I could recognize.
Yeah.
And say, I could see myself doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
If the WNBA were more visible, or do you think it's becoming more visible in that way?
Yeah, I think it is becoming more visible. But, a lot of people will tell me, they say, like, when is your season? Like, when can I watch your games? Are they on TV? And, that is kind of like telling right there. You're like, well, we are, but, the word must not be out because, you can catch an NBA game every night of the week and multiple NBA, games. And, the summer season is kind of difficult because, that doesn't feel like basketball season in some ways. It's, the winter time is basketball. There's NCAA, NBA. So that kind of, I think, throws it off a little bit. I think one of our goals in the WNBA is we'd like to have a longer season and get paid more so that we don't have to go overseas, because playing year-round is really hard and it's a terrible grind. Like, you see girls who are 30 years old and they're coming to the end of their career because they've just been playing. They've played 10 years, but they've played 20 seasons. Yeah. So.
So I have a question. One of the things that you mentioned was about community. That you would hope that the WNBA comes to Philadelphia. And it's not here. But have y'all ever thought about creating a camp for girls? To start, I know the 76ers have a camp, not just for boys, but they also have one for girls. And sometimes they house it in different schools. So they have one in Rosemont School that they do in the summertime.
Oh, nice.
So like a week.
Yeah.
2 weeks, where they get to meet other female basketball players and kind of give them some tools at a very young age, like 7, 8. I wonder if that's something that y'all are thinking about.
Yeah.
See if we can get some investors, maybe some NBA players to help us connect to maybe bring some kind of camp.
Yeah.
Open up the awareness
Yeah.
more so that the girls, like you're saying, does they have the opportunity to be trained and coached and don't have to wait for a father or someone to actually get injured or something happens to
Yeah, I mean, I know that, like, through the NBA and WNBA, we have, it's NBA, WNBA Cares, and that is really how we get out in the community, wherever we're located. That's what we did a lot of when I was in Indiana, and we would have camps for the community. We would go out in the community, build playgrounds, stuff like that. I think it would be hard for us to come to a city where there's not yet a team to kind of support it. In my time, like, since I've not been able to play, part of my thing is I've gotten into coaching and teaching, and I try and get out in the community as best I can and, teach the game and, hopefully grow the popularity of the game and inspire people, to get involved in it like I did, because it's been, such a positive experience for me. I don't really know what the process of, bringing a team here would be and, the best way to do it. I'm like, New York's trying to sell their team. Can we just buy them up and start a team here in Philly? Yeah?
But it's like $1,300.
Mm-hmm. It's such a money maker. It's crazy.
You only want to get really pretty much those families that can afford.
Yeah.
That has that money to afford for their kids.
Yeah.
But the other students, all kids that are in other areas, can't afford to have that.
No.
They're going to local recreation centers and having to enjoy the environment, the fights, and the whole nine, just to go out and enjoy themselves and have that outlet.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, because I've gone into those rec centers in the city, and I worked with the boys team from Northeast High School, and like you said, that environment. I mean, it's tough. You come out of there late at night, like it's not okay, and you would hope that those kids who want to take the next step and really get involved in something that could get them out of that neighborhood first off, keep them out of trouble, that'd be available. So it's sad that a camp charges that much, and it's not more available to them. But I do hear, because I'll do clinics and stuff, and my clinics are nowhere near that expensive. They'll be like 20, but if someone from a neighborhood who can't afford even because to some people $25 that's not in the budget, and so I'll sponsor kids to come to my clinics and stuff. It's I've always said if someone wants to learn basketball from me, I will not tell them no if they can't afford it. So yeah. I have a dog, so I'm kind of a parent.
So I had this experience with my daughter years ago. I took her to the Flyers, preseason. They opened up practice, and they had this stuff outside. So we went, spent the day at Wells Fargo playing hockey, looking at the trophies, and then watched practice and came home. And as soon as I came home, I put on the NHL Network, which is the only thing that's ever on. And she said to me, "Dad, I'm going to be sorry to say this. I hate hockey." And I was heartbroken, of course. I said to her, "Why?" And she said, "'Cause I never see girls play."
Aw.
And it was really, it's so interesting, right? And so I said to her, "What are you talking about?" And so because I'm familiar with the women's game, so I said, I started telling her about all these people, started watching YouTube clips. But she was like, and then we were visiting my parents during the Women's World Cup, and we went to a Women's World Cup game. So I'm always trying to expose her to that stuff, but I don't think it's registering.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is not just her, but my son, right? That to start to accept that this counts as sport, that it's not some sideshow.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I wonder. So my question to you is not how do I raise my kids, but more I'm not going to sit with my high heels on, and I'm not going to do the things that your parents do, which is remarkable. I'm not going to do that. And my kids are not that's not their thing. But where do you see kind of changes? Because I think there's a commercial element to what you're talking about, right? With the WNBA.
Yeah.
Stuff, but just in terms of visibility of female athletes, and these, because there are programs like this for hockey. There's a Snyder Foundation. There's in Merion, there's a soccer thing where if you just want to play and it's open to my daughter was registered in this Snyder thing, and so I just if you could reflect a bit on this question of visibility and what it means for the what did you say 0.03%?
Yeah, it's 0.03. Yeah.
So what about the other 99?
Yeah.
Whatever percent? What's happening that we need to
Yeah, well, I think that example of your daughter, it's to think you can be able to, really do something, it helps to see somebody who you're that look, she looks like me, she was once a little girl too, so that makes it feel possible to me. And that's, you have kids, everyone has the people they look up to, and, it's because they see that person and they're that's what I want to do. It's very clear. And, like I said, when I was growing up, my dad especially, and, I always say he's the only person who loves basketball more than I do. And so it was cool to share that with him, but also he made a point to take me to see women's basketball players. Like that was what he, like we would go to men's games too, but like, you know, our special thing we had together. Sorry?
Did your brothers go to those games?
No, it was always either me and him or me and my mom. Yeah.
That it's not like, that's, so I'm thinking of,
Yeah.
it's not just, for me, it's not just that I want my daughter to see
Yeah,
them,
yeah.
I want him to see them as well.
Yeah.
So that the game becomes
Not just women, yeah.
women watching women.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you.
So that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And, yeah, go ahead.
When you were talking about your daughter when she was like, you know, yeah, I see the game. The thought that came to my mind was that those people on TV are not reachable. And not that, like, how am I gonna reach her?
Yeah.
Even though that's a woman, they're playing and they're good and successful, but she's a champion, you know, so is there anywhere here, local, that I can actually have
Mhm.
something I can reach to say that, yeah, that can be me, that's possible, that dream can, you know, propel, versus, I can see it on TV and it's great, but how can I really see that up front? Like basically in my face.
Mhm.
No, I meant the game I think is great to
Mhm.
take them to the game so they can actually see these. I took my daughter to a game,
totally
like
agree with
6 rows behind LeBron,
Mhm.
behind the Lakers, and she was like in an element of like extreme surprise.
Yeah, yeah.
She felt like we're so close.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, yeah, you know how much I paid for these tickets? But I felt like because that was a dream of hers, it was worth it.
Mm.
Which brings me to the thought where he was like, having a sign on your wall, like, you know, how much is it worth to you?
Mhm.
It's worth it for you every day.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to allow this to defeat me. The determination
Mhm.
kept kicking in.
Yeah.
She's like, I got to do this.
Yeah.
The people are watching me. People are dreaming about me. That
Mhm.
young girl was like, oh, my favorite team lost. That kind of made her like, you know, everyone gets devastated, just not your
Yeah.
team, but, you know, everyone. So the impact is very vital and
Yeah.
essential. I don't think whoever doesn't want to put their money into the pot and make the team feel like it's more worthy of
Mhm.
just below the men, the value of the negotiated cost for the women versus the guys are losing.
Yeah.
They're losing more than they think.
Yeah.
It's funny because there's sort of the two ends of this. There's the end where you want to see this big cultural change, so it's just ordinary for boys and girls to
Mhm.
watch both men and women.
Yeah.
And at the other end, you need these people who are so unusually committed.
Yeah.
You know, she's not a normal basketball player.
No.
It's only people like her who are going to make the sport
You have to
accessible.
suffer.
So you
Yeah.
have these trailblazers, and we're a generation in, and you still need trailblazers.
Yeah, exactly.
But the commitment that it took you to get there is not something every little girl is going to replicate.
No.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, the sacrifice is like unbelievable. And, you know, to me, like, it never felt like that because I felt like I always had to have, I always got to have experiences that everyone else didn't. So it never felt like I was giving up anything. I'm like, go to prom or like, you know, make the McDonald's All-American game. I'm like, I'm good. Like, have a good time. Like, so I, like you said, like normal things like that, you know, most like kids growing up, you know, it just didn't really matter to me as much as, you know, just continuing to further, you know, my dream and, you know, doing whatever it took to get to that next level. But I totally agree with you guys. I mean, it's like, just as much as like, it's not like I probably watch more men's basketball than I do watch women's. I'm guilty of that, but it's because it's first off, it's more available. But, you know, why can't, you know, I feel like a lot of females do watch, you know, men's sports as it is. You know, there's I think a lot of viewership there. So, you know, why can't we have the same, you know, it go both ways for, you know, guys tuning in to watch girls play? And, you know, I don't understand it. I hear a lot of, you know, ignorant stuff out there, but, you know, I try to just, you know, ignore all that. You know, there's no point in giving it a voice.
You know, mother and daughter commercial might work.
Yeah, yeah.
Because women and their children, like, it's just a natural instinct.
Mhm.
You know, it's maternal.
Yeah. When
That might be the element of advertising.
Yeah. When I was planning for tonight, and I was thinking I was going to show some videos of like, just I was thinking I was like, all right, what am I going to talk about? You know, what am I going to go with? And you know, I saw some videos online of like some things that basically put down the WNBA, put down women's sports, and I'm like, I don't want to show that though. Like, I don't want to give that a voice. I don't want to make that the focal point. There's some like troll behind his computer making a video. I'm like, why would it, you know? That's not the focus. focus is what can we do moving forward. It's not about, who doesn't think it can work. It's, let's work with the people who do think it can work and, who, want to keep progressing the game. So
So in a different direction, so I am guilty of spending more time on ESPN.com than I should. Workday. But one thing I have I think I've discerned over the years, but I want to hear your perspective from inside the locker room, is that issues of sexuality are not nearly as salient in women's sports as they are in men's sports. Is that your experience?
yes. I mean, right when I got to college, I kind of got more of an idea of it. And, I've played on many teams with, first off, teammates dating each other, being in relationships. I've played on teams where teammates are married. And that is, when I talk about some of the, more, sensitive topics, it's, everybody in the WNBA is gay. That's what's thrown out there. And that's reasons people say our league isn't marketable. And first off, if that's your problem, then you have bigger problems. But that is, something that's much more, upfront than it is in the men's side. Not that there are not, there are. They just don't talk about it. And the women's side, it's a little bit more, I honestly just think it's more accepted. But we're told that doesn't help with our viewership, and that doesn't help with.
You're actually told that by league.
Well, not like they're saying like don't do this. It's just we see it in the media. There was a player who she stopped playing in the WNBA not too long ago. She basically started bashing the whole WNBA, talking about her name was Candice Wiggins, and she basically came out bashing the whole WNBA. She played in the WNBA for like 8 or 9 years. Yeah, she said she put it out there saying 90% of the league is gay, and basically like didn't just throw that number out there, but then went on to like make it sound very negative and And I'll be honest, I've played on teams where people have been dating, and it's a big distraction because they, especially in college and stuff, people are immature, and it can be a very big distraction to the team. But then as you grow up, it's like, people are going to do what they're going to do. If it affects, their work life, then that's their own problem. But you can't tell people what they can do, first off, and then,
But there's no animus in the locker room toward a gay player.
No, not at all.
Way, let's say that it appears to be attached to let's say, men's professional sports, and you only get a Jason Pollock once in a generation. No, there's definitely, and we have, we celebrate Pride Month in WNBA. We wear, a shirt for it. Like we'll wear a warm-up shirt for the month, and there were actually but there were players in the league who didn't want to wear it. But the majority of the league stood by it, and a lot of our fans are from, from the community, and so we, it's not something that we're against at all. We embrace it, and there's nothing in the locker room where somebody is being singled out for being gay or whatever they're choosing to do, and it shouldn't be. It's ridiculous.
The notion that say that there's a lot of gay players in the WNBA, it's like what you were talking about earlier with the notion that sports makes women less feminine. It's just another way of saying.
Thank you.
You're not feminine.
Yeah, exactly, and it's like. It's so frustrating, It's like, these conversations that we have, and it's like, why don't we ever learn our lesson from like, the mistakes we made in the past and the assumptions we made in the past, and it's ridiculous, and you can't tell somebody, what is what's ladylike, and first off, I don't want to be ladylike when I'm playing basketball. Like, if somebody calls me that, then I should not have a job playing basketball.
A lot of people want to enforce that. There's a lot invested in that.
Yeah, and just look at like some of those like. When I was in high school, when I was at Penn State, we're not representing Big Ten women's basketball in the manner it should be.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Basketball.
Yeah.
Just the sport of basketball.
Women's basketball. Yeah.